Today on the Word Preacher Podcast, handling uncomfortable truths, the effects of mishandling uncomfortable truths, and the peril of the Chaldeans. I'm Brett Jensen, and this is the Word Preacher Podcast. All right, today we are looking at 1 Nephi chapters 16 through 22. All right, so we've handled a little bit of some of the visions that Nephi and Lehi have shared with us, and now we're looking at some of the consequences that happen after that occurs. So Nephi has gone to his brothers and he's kind of reprimanded them. And they did not really appreciate it. And this is their response we see in 1 Nephi chapter 16 in the first 3 verses. And now it came to pass that after I, Nephi, had made an end of speaking to my brethren, behold, they said unto me, Thou hast declared unto us hard things, more than we are able to bear. And it came to pass that I said unto them that I knew that I had spoken hard things against the wicked according to the truth, and the righteous have I justified, and testified that they should be lifted up at the last day. Wherefore the guilty taketh the truth to be hard, for it cutteth them to the very center. And now, my brethren, if ye were righteous and were willing to hearken to the truth and give heed unto it, that ye might walk uprightly before God, then would ye not murmur because of the truth and say, Thou speakest hard things against us. Okay, was this response, was this back and forth justified? Were Laman and Lemuel's perspectives justified? Let's first look at what were the hard things that Nephi spoke. And you can look at some of the interpretation that Nephi gave them, but really in his admonitions, it was that they needed to have faith because they did not think that the Lord would answer their prayers. They needed to believe that. And he was very passionate that, they needed to pray and believe that God would answer. He also admonished them to keep the commandments, that their behaviors could be more along the lines of what God had asked. He also pointed to examples from prophets and the scriptures. In other words, telling them that they needed to learn from the past. These are the hard things that Nephi taught. Were they actually hard? Well, now, it's possible you can look at those passages and say, well, he didn't really butter them up. He just kind of told it how he saw it. He did not emphasize God's love for his brothers. He emphasized the dangers of their attitudes and behaviors. Certainly his counsel was pointed, but it was motivated by love. You can see that from the subsequent verse that Nephi offers. After he's done, Nephi is persuasive enough that he observes this in verse 5. And it came to pass that they did humble themselves before the Lord, insomuch that I had joy and great hopes of them, that they would walk in the paths of righteousness. So it was delivered with the hope that they would change and become better. That was the goal. It wasn't to make them feel loved. It was to get them to do things that would help them be better people. That was the goal, and I don't think his discourse that he gave to them was inappropriate. He had some success, even though it was a little bit temporary. We'll get into that as we keep going. But before we do, let's just look really quickly at a modern application of the same principle. Now, in social media, we have seen several vocal individuals who have taken issue with the council of prophets and apostles. And when this is done, in the best cases, they claim that the approaches used by messengers of God are hard, or more than certain people are able to bear, advocating for certain groups. The messages that prophets and apostles tend to give, though, are admonitions to increase faith, keep the commandments, and learn from the examples of scriptures and prophets. It's hard to find a place in general conference where this is not the standard of general authorities and general officers of the church. Have faith, keep the commandments, learn from these examples in scriptures and prophets, and they'll throw in some other examples too, The Hobbit, or other story. But the idea is the same. It's an admonition to increase our behaviors, to make us have a desire to be better, to increase our spirituality. Now, I have heard some pointed counsel in some general conferences, but I do not think I've ever heard a counsel in any general conference that is more pointed than what Nephi spoke to his brethren. We can also conclusively say that the counsel we receive from general conference is motivated by a desire to help us. It is out of love. So, what is the proper response when we hear hard truths? Whether it's looking at this example in the context of Laman and Lemuel, responding to the hard truths they heard from Nephi, or whether it's us when we hear counsel from a leader that might be uncomfortable. The goal is the same. We ought to take the parts of that counsel that can help us to improve and use them. In other words, increase our faith and repent. This is why Jesus said the things he said. It's why he sends his prophets to say what they say. This is the goal, to help us be better. Now, over time, as people repeatedly kind of mishandle uncomfortable truths, you begin to see patterns develop that are not good. Let's talk a little bit about some of the effects of mishandling uncomfortable truths. So some of the narrative continues, and they have difficulty getting food. Nephi's bow breaks. Ishmael dies. Laman and Lemuel and some of the sons of Ishmael, they again turn away from the truths that have been given them by prophets, and kind of take their own counsel. And they come to some pretty uncomfortable proposals. Let's look at an example of something that Laman and Lemuel were considering in 1 Nephi chapter 16, verses 37 and 38. And Laman said unto Lemuel and also unto the sons of Ishmael, Behold, let us slay our father and also our brother Nephi, who has taken it upon himself to be our ruler and our teacher, who are his elder brethren. Now he says that the Lord has talked with him, and also that angels have ministered unto him. But behold, we know that he lies unto us, and he tells us these things, and he worketh many things by his cunning arts, that he may deceive our eyes, thinking perhaps that he may lead us away into some strange wilderness, and after he has led us away, he has thought to make himself a king and a ruler over us, that he may do with us according to his will and pleasure. And after this manner did my brother Laman stir up their hearts to anger. Now, before we tackle that, let's get another passage in response to Nephi's suggestion that they needed to build a ship. This is in 1 Nephi 17, verse 22. And we know that the people who are in the land of Jerusalem were a righteous people, for they kept the statutes and judgments of the Lord and all his commandments according to the law of Moses. Wherefore we know that they are a righteous people, and our Father hath judged them, and hath led us away, because we would hearken unto his words. Yea, and our brother is like unto him. And after this manner of language did my brethren murmur and complain against us. So we have kind of an interesting situation here. In the one example, in chapter 16, they're contemplating murder. They're suggesting that they kill Lehi and Nephi. And I think it's also interesting the language that they use in chapter 16. They're essentially describing a cult. They're using cunning arts to deceive our eyes so that they can lead us away and then control us. It's accusing them of being a cult. This isn't like a unique idea. There are people in various times who have accused the true church of being a cult. Layman did it maybe before some of these other people, but it's not new. What's interesting is he's contemplating murder and accusing them of doing all of this stuff. And then also, the people in Jerusalem were a righteous people, and they kept the statutes and judgments of the Lord, all his commandments according to the law of Moses. I mean, on the one hand, thou shalt not kill, and on the other hand, they were righteous people. How can you have this kind of discrepancy? Let's read a passage here in 1 Nephi chapter 17, verses 43 through 45. And now, after all these things, the time has come that they become wicked, yea, nearly unto rightness. And I know not, but are at this day about to be destroyed. For I know that the day must surely come that they will be destroyed, save a few only who shall be led away into captivity. Wherefore the Lord commanded my father that he should depart into the wilderness. And the Jews also sought to take away his life. Yea, and ye have also sought to take away his life. Wherefore ye are murderers in your hearts, and ye are like unto them. Ye are swift to do iniquity, but slow to remember the Lord your God. Ye have seen an angel, and he spake unto you. Yea, ye have heard his voice from time to time, and he hath spoken unto you in a still small voice. But ye were past feeling, that ye could not feel his words. Wherefore he has spoken unto you like unto the voice of thunder, which did cause the earth to shake, as if it were to divide asunder. Okay, so in Nephi's response here to what their complaints are, there are a couple of things that we can get out of this. Because people have a tendency to think that they are good. Nobody thinks, yeah, I'm the villain. I'm the bad guy in this story. People think that they are good, generally. We also tend to think favorably on those who are similar to us, or those that we like. They must also be good. I'm not the villain, therefore I would be able to tell if somebody was the bad guy. Now, this tendency is undoubtedly one reason that the Lord and his prophets frequently discuss commandments and standards, so that we can understand we are not good. We are not good. We fall short, but we can become good. We can do better. We can be better. And this is critically important. People who don't understand that can judge other people incorrectly. In the positive sense, they can say, oh, they're so good. Those people in Jerusalem, they were okay. they were not okay. And Nephi told the truth about that situation. Another point. Because we love our own ideas, our own counsel, and the counsel of our friends, we can sometimes have a tendency to ignore the Holy Spirit. This is what Nephi is describing when he says, past feeling. Ye could not feel his words, you were past feeling. God is trying to talk to us more often than we give him credit for. It's frequently something we take for granted. I think that an excellent example of someone who tries the opposite, tries to not be past feeling, can be seen in President Russell M. Nelson, President of the Church. He's continually exerting effort to be sensitive to the Spirit and to make changes that will bring us closer to what Jesus Christ has given us. When you think about changes that have been made in the church, whether it's the way we describe the name of the church, the role of the bishop in Aaronic priesthood leadership, in ministering, all of these are examples of searching diligently in the scriptures and being sensitive for opportunities that will help us align closer to what Jesus wants us to do. He's a perfect example of how to never grow past feeling. And I think that that's really important to not only understand, but also emulate. As we look at this example of what Laman and Lemuel did, they got to the point, because of their repeated disregard for the commandments, that they didn't see a problem with contemplating killing people, and that they were defensive of people who thought the same way that they did, which was totally wrong. We need to be very careful about how we judge what is right and wrong. And the best way to do that is through trusted sources, prophets and apostles, the examples in the scriptures, Jesus Christ himself. They can help us to determine what is right. And if we hold to that, it will make all the difference. So in this example, we had seen this doubt that was raised by Laman about whether the people in Jerusalem would have been destroyed. He claimed that they were righteous, and that the Babylonians wouldn't do that. So what was the deal with the Babylonians? Interestingly enough, after talking about how Jerusalem would be destroyed by the Chaldeans, Nephi then proceeds at the end of this record, in our reading, to quote several chapters in Isaiah about the fate of Jerusalem's destroyers. And even though there's a lot of stuff we can talk about with the ship and with the voyage and arriving in the promised land and many other things, I'd like to look at these passages that quote Isaiah. This first one is in 1 Nephi chapter 20, verses 10 through 14. For behold, I have refined thee, I have chosen thee in the furnace of affliction. For mine own sake, yea, for mine own sake will I do this. For I will not suffer my name to be polluted, and I will not give my glory unto another. Hearken unto me, O Jacob, and Israel my called, for I am he. I am the first, and I am also the last. Mine hand hath also laid the foundation of the earth, and my right hand hath spanned the heavens. I call unto them, and they stand up together. All ye assemble yourselves and hear. Who among them hath declared these things unto them? The Lord hath loved him. Yea, and he will fulfill his word which he hath declared by them. And he will do his pleasure on Babylon, and his arm shall come upon the Chaldeans. So on the one hand, we have Babylon is going to totally destroy Jerusalem. And on the other hand, God is going to lower his arm on the Chaldeans. This is important because Babylon was not the chosen people. They were raised for a purpose, to chastise the chosen people. That's kind of a shocking truth, or at least it was shocking to Habakkuk in the Old Testament. This was what he was surprised to find out, that the Lord had raised up a nation specifically to attack his chosen people. This was an unpleasant truth that he uncovered, and it was tough for him to deal with that truth. But the purpose was, as Isaiah said, not to suffer his name to be polluted, which is exactly what Judah was doing. They were not following the law. Josiah rent his garments because they were not following his law. But also, in the same passage, that he would not give his glory to another. The promises he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob still apply. From a historical context, Babylon did come and destroy Jerusalem in 587 BC. But Daniel, who had been carried away to Babylon before that, before even Lehi left, Daniel was still alive to see this prophecy fulfilled when Babylon fell to the Medes and Persians. And it was under Darius the Mede, not even the Babylonians, not the Chaldeans. It was under a Persian king that Daniel faced his most famous peril in the lion's den. This absolutely happened if Babylon rose to fulfill a specific purpose and then it was overcome. I think this is important. There's a pattern here that we can maybe gather. Many things that seem really big and important 50 years ago are now insignificant. And many things that now seem really important could end up being really insignificant in 50 years from now. This contrast is important in the Book of Mormon because it echoes the invitation of Jesus himself, who taught, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." We are best off when we prioritize those things that persist. The teachings and examples of the prophets can help us identify the places where we can most improve. Embrace their counsel, even if it seems hard. In the end, it will be for our good. We appreciate all the support for the Word Preacher podcast. Next week, we will be looking at 2 Nephi, chapters 1 through 5, focusing a little on the plan of salvation and the purpose of life. Of course, there was a ton that we did not cover in this week's curriculum, with building the ship, traveling to the promised land, the dangers at sea, the Liahona, tons of stuff that is absolutely worth your time to invest in and to study deeper. Please do that. And as always, fight on.